Hi, welcome to Into Zimbabwe, brought to you by the Zimbabwe Human Rights Matters platform. My name is Ep2 and I am your host. So in today's business, we'll be discussing government's performance in addressing socio-economic rights under COVID-19. Have they fared well? Have they done poor? What has been their challenges and what should they do? Equally, what have they been doing on the ground? To do so, we'll be measuring their performance against the background of status quo. Now let's get a brief background of the status quo or the situation in Zimbabwe under COVID-19. COVID-19 is a global pandemic that has forced a lot of governments around the world, Zimbabwe included, to initiate or to impose lockdowns. But these lockdowns, what have they entailed and what impacts have they had on the economy and what impacts have they had even on the socio-economic rights of Zimbabwean citizens? The closure of the informal sector and part of the formal sector, which has seen almost about 10,000 jobs in the informal sector being lost due to the closure of the economy and due to lockdown. This is a preventative measure sanctioned by the statutory instrument 220, initiated by the Ministry of Health in order to combat, prevent and mitigate the spread of COVID-19. Now, this has seen poverty rates striking high, and we've actually witnessed the economy shrinking at a -6%. That's a negative growth, and it has had much effect on the inflation and it has much effect on the cost of living. And this itself has pushed the general citizens or the marginalized citizens into poverty, and it has widened the gap between the rich and the poor. Now, this is where the discussion starts. The gap between the rich and the poor, which is best understood as inequality. Inequality comes down when certain people are benefiting from status quo and others aren't, and even the access to opportunities and wealth, or even the accumulation of it, isn't imbalanced or is striked in a way that is not so equal. For example, the general citizens in Zimbabwe, 85% of them to be precise, are unemployed or they are employed in the informal sector. So that means that the informal sector supports the livelihoods of the majority. And within its closure due to lockdown, it means that 85% of Zimbabwe's active population is put at home and it is put distant from their means of subsistence. So that means that these people have been imposed into a holdom of poverty. And as we have always reiterated in many of our episodes, that poverty is the worst violation of human rights. Why? Because it deprives the general citizen from access, enjoyment, and even guaranteed benefit from social services, economic services, political rights, and even basic fundamental human needs. For example, if one person today is to stop going to work when they live below the poverty datum line, that's $1 per day, it simply means that they are not going to be able to sustain themselves to buy food, medication, and even access other payable services and goods that are therefore commodified in the economy. So in and of itself, lockdowns have been a means to systematically push out the majority from the economic and distributed machine of Zimbabwe. But is this deliberate or is this accidental? Well, neither of the two. It's circumstantial. COVID-19 is a novel virus that no one had the solution to. But now as developments and studies are being conducted around it, people have noticed means to either contain it or to prevent its spread, right? But then lockdowns themselves, they are a double-edged knife. They might protect the people from COVID-19, but they're not protecting the people from hunger. They're not protecting the people from unequal access to education. Another very critical sector that is being disrupted by COVID-19 and lockdowns. And Section 30 of the Constitution says that every citizen has a right to access social services and social care, and it is the duty of government to take practical measures within all its means and resources to ensure that that right itself is delivered to the citizens. But has the government done so well in upholding the dictates of Section 30? Equally, has the government done so well in upholding the dictates of Chapter 4 of the entire Bill of Rights or the Declaration of Rights in the Zimbabwean Constitution? And Chapter 4 is the gratification of the Universal Declaration of Rights in the Zimbabwean Constitution. It covers civil and political rights, socio-economic rights, basic fundamental rights. It even speaks of sexual and reproductive health rights. So we are measuring how government has been faring in addressing, in particular, socio-economic rights. So within the closure of the economy, what has the government done so far? It has imposed strict curfew laws to limit movement and mobility as to contain the pandemic. But has it done much in terms of protecting the people's social needs and social care? Right? Has it given people social safety nets? No. There was mention of it, but with little action on the ground. Like we said, there haven't been issued social safety nets in order to ensure that people, for the period that lockdown is being held or is being enforced, they are taken care of in terms of their need to financial security, their access to food, their access to health services. We have a health sector that is overwhelmed, and this was even confirmed by the government spokesperson, Mr. Nick Mangwana, through his Twitter handle, where he said, we have an overwhelmed health sector. So in and of itself, it shows that our health sector is deteriorated and our frontline workers in the health sector themselves are under-remunerated. And in education, lockdown has seen the disruption of face-to-face lectures, or in fact their suspension, and it has also seen schools resorting to online learning. And online learning being put on the reality of the background is, 1, data tariffs have hiked high, 2, devices have to be bought, 3, tuition fees have to be paid. And thirdly, the education system itself has to benefit everybody. But this now overlooks children or students found in remote areas. And realistically, 85% of Zimbabwe's active population has not gotten a raise since the past 9 to 10 months of lockdown. And that means hardly a few will afford this. And this is widening the gap between the rich and the poor, because those from affluent backgrounds can afford all the requirements of online learning, but those from poor backgrounds and those from remote areas cannot access it as efficiently as others can. And that's a byline of inequality, and that is also a violation of one's right to access education and social services, as mentioned in Section 30 and Section 75 of the Zimbabwean Constitution. Equally, it is also a digression from the International Convention or the International Covenant on Socio-Economic Rights, which says each and every government has to ensure that through its policies and legal framework, all these socio-economic rights are covered and delivered to every citizen without prejudice, without discrimination. But is this not discrimination? Is this not exclusion of the poor and marginalized citizens? Equally, the children of the 85% that has no formal jobs, the 85% that have been put down to house arrest and limited their economic subsistence because of lockdown. And what has our government done to address those issues? And if we measure that, government has been responding in actions that are contrary to status quo. Last year, we witnessed the looting of COVID-19 related funds or COVID-19 resources worth $6 million. And yes, we saw Obadiah being relieved of his duties, but did we see that money being recovered and being put back to benefit the general disadvantaged majorities? No. Furthermore, the Honorable Minister of Finance and Economic Development in Zimbabwe, Professor Mthuli, an Oxford graduate with a PhD in economics, believes that we can tax our country into prosperity. So literally we are a tax-based economy as Zimbabwe. And against that background, we see the government giving a tax holiday to Kudakwashe Tagwire. Now, who is Kudakwashe Tagwire? Business mogul, influential businessman, an entrepreneur who is a fuel mogul. He runs a fuel monopoly in Zimbabwe. And remember, fuel is the backbone of Zimbabwe's industry. It's an essential service, and it is the biggest tax generator into the Zimbabwean purse. And this is the same person running it, getting a tax holiday. What is a tax holiday? It means that he has a temporary tax suspension for a period of 5 years. That's 5 years of not getting the biggest chunk of tax into the fiscal purse. And how does this affect the delivery of socio-economic rights? For a tax-based economy, we rely on taxes for the government to deliver goods and services to its people. So once we suspend the biggest contributor to that purse, it generally means that we are going to have a deficit, or we are going to have a shortage, and that will impede efficient and effective delivery. And that itself shows the government's lack of foresight in its decisions. And this even raises suspicions as to the reasons behind giving him tax holidays. That's tax injustice. It's a violation of the right to tax justice. Because the Constitution, in Section 198, it says the tax burden has to be shared fairly among citizens. But if you suspend the biggest contributor to the industry, it means that the tax burden to even support socio-economic rights in Zimbabwe is being shared unfairly. the tax burden or the deficit itself is being imposed on 85% of the country, which has no state paycheck or which gives little to less contribution to the purse, and that is the most overtaxed group of the society. So that itself is a violation of socio-economic rights as protected in Section 30, as protected under Chapter 4, the entire Chapter 4 of the Bill of Rights in Zimbabwe in the Constitution. There's an ignored group of Zimbabwe's economy and Zimbabwe's politics, which is called the civil society. The civil society is a group of individuals, interest groups, and associations that bridge the gap between the markets, the government, and the citizens of Zimbabwe. They usually come in to give aid in collaboration or sometimes in antagonization with government, and even to provide goods and services wherever government is not present or whenever resources are limited. For example, those that are in the private voluntary organizations sector, organizations like UNICEF, organizations like NANGO, organizations like JCT, organizations like UNWCRC, YAS. These are people that have been into donating and doing socio-corporate responsibility or humanitarian work as to help the poor, marginalized people in remote areas. COVID-19 has exposed a lot of favoritism and unequal access to opportunities, as well as services, as well as even contributions to the fiscal purse and the economy of Zimbabwe. And it has exposed the violation and poor addressing of socio-economic rights as enshrined in the Constitution of Zimbabwe. So, recommendations: what should government do and what do we advise the state and non-state actors to do? The first thing is, one, government should form up a solidarity fund, a citizen solidarity fund, where it partners with private and public sector in order to mobilize or fundraise for social safety nets for citizens under lockdown. And lockdown should be used as a state or as a situation to carry out rigorous testing so that we know how many people actually have COVID-19 and how many people have actually suffered from COVID-19, so that we can plan accurately as to how we can acquire a vaccine. Now, that's another point that we're going to discuss. Then secondly, the government has to ensure that it applies the law fairly, it respects issues to do with tax justice, and it respects the International Convention on Socio-Economic Rights of Citizens, where it has to offer tax holidays to the sectors that are suffering greater losses under COVID-19 instead of those experiencing greater gains under COVID-19 or maintaining their gains under COVID-19. Then now we look at acquiring a deterrence for COVID-19, and that is acquiring the vaccine. The government hasn't given us a clear message or a clear signal or a clear directive as to what is their plan towards the vaccine. But now they have to come up with a clear, comprehensive plan as to acquiring the vaccine, because the vaccine is cheaper than lockdown, because the economic losses suffered under lockdown affect a greater number of people as compared to acquiring a vaccine. And lastly, we need to enforce, or we need Parliament of Zimbabwe to take up its role effectively as an oversight player in ensuring that socio-economic, including civil and political rights in Zimbabwe, are addressed through policy consistency, policy accuracy, as well as ensuring that there is transparency, accountability, and moral probity in government's conduct. And ladies and gentlemen, my name is Ep2. This was Into Zimbabwe, brought to you by the Zimbabwe Human Rights Matters platform. See you next week.